The desert sun had barely crested the horizon when the emergency beacon pierced through every frequency at Bagram Airfield. 3 seconds of static, then silence. 3 seconds more, then nothing. The pattern repeated 17 times before anyone in the operations center understood what they were hearing. It wasn't a distress call. It was a countdown. Major Alina Voss stood in the back of the briefing room, arms crossed, watching younger pilots scramble to their equipment. Nobody looked at her. They never did anymore. At 41, she'd become a fixture of the base, respected in theory, invisible in practice. Her flight suit bore patches from conflicts most of these kids studied in high school. The A-10 Thunderbolt II she'd been flying for 19 years sat in the far corner of the flight line, weathered and outdated, much like her career had become. The beacon stopped. Colonel Hendricks burst through the door, his face drained of color. "We have a situation. Outpost Keating, grid November Whiskey 72. 43 personnel surrounded, communication severed. Taliban forces estimated at 300 plus." He paused, scanning the room. "Every rotary asset is grounded due to dust storms rolling in from the north. Fixed-wing fast movers are 30 minutes out minimum." Someone whispered what everyone was thinking. "They'll be dead in 15. Hendricks' eyes finally found Voss in the back. She didn't move. "Major, how quickly can you get your Warthog airborne?" The room fell silent. A Captain Mitchell, fresh from Pensacola with perfect scores and a perfect jawline, actually laughed. "Sir, with respect, the A-10 is subsonic. By the time she arrives—" "7 minutes," Voss interrupted, her voice quiet but sharp as razor wire. "I can be wheels up in 3, on station in 7. "That's impossible," Mitchell said. "The pre-flight alone is already done." She was moving toward the door. "I've been doing pre-flight since 0400 every morning for 6 months. Someone want to tell me why, or should I just go save 43 lives while you calculate the aerodynamics?" Hendricks nodded once. "Call sign." "Longbow 3-1. She stopped at the threshold. "Same as always, sir. Nobody's ever bothered to remember it." The door slammed behind her, and she was running, boots pounding tarmac, her body remembering the urgency even if her paperwork suggested she'd forgotten how to fly with purpose. Behind her, she could hear Hendricks barking orders, the younger pilots mobilizing as backup, their skepticism thick as the approaching dust on the horizon. But Alina Voss wasn't thinking about them. She was thinking about 43 names she didn't know yet, 43 reasons her obsolete aircraft suddenly mattered more than every stealth fighter on the continent. Her crew chief, Staff Sergeant Ramon Gutierrez, was already pulling the chocks when she reached the hard stand. He'd seen her running from across the field. 19 years together meant he could read her body language like instrument panels. "Troops in contact," he shouted over the auxiliary power unit's whine. "Overrun scenario. I need max ordnance mixed load." She was climbing the ladder, not waiting for confirmation. "Whatever you hung yesterday stays. Add 2 more rocket pods if we have 90 seconds. You'll be tail heavy." "Then I'll fly nose down. Move, Ramon." The cockpit smelled like hydraulic fluid and old leather. Her helmet hung where she'd left it, worn padding shaped to her skull from 1,000 missions. The checklist was muscle memory, battery on, inverters checked, hydraulic pressure building. Through the canopy she watched Gutierrez and his team swarming her aircraft, ordnance crews sprinting with Hydra rocket pods on transport dollies. The radio crackled. "Longbow 3-1 tower. Winds 270 at 18, gusting 23. Weather deteriorating rapidly. Advise delay." "Negative tower. 43 reasons I'm not delaying. Request immediate clearance, runway 03. Longbow 3-1, cleared for immediate takeoff. Godspeed." She didn't respond. The twin General Electric turbofans were already spooling up, their distinctive whine rising to a howl. The A-10 wasn't elegant. It didn't break sound barriers or slip past radar. It was titanium and ammunition wrapped around a 30mm cannon, built to absorb punishment and deliver devastation, just like its pilot. The throttles went forward. 7,000 pounds of thrust pushed her down the runway, the aircraft heavy with ordnance but eager. At 130 knots she rotated, climbing into a sky already browning with distant dust. The young pilots would launch in formation, flying their sleek F-16s in textbook patterns. Alina Voss flew alone, like she always had, toward a battle that had probably already been lost. She just refused to accept it yet. Below, Bagram shrank to insignificance. The Hindu Kush mountains rose ahead, their peaks scraping 10,000 feet. Alina pushed the stick forward, diving into the valleys where Taliban fighters thought themselves safe from American air power. The A-10's wings, straight, unswept, brutally functional, cut through turbulence that would have rattled newer aircraft. She'd flown this route 100 times in training, memorized every ridge and wadi. But never with 43 lives counting down like that beacon. Never with an entire command structure watching to see if the old warhorse they'd been trying to quietly retire could still run. Her radar warning receiver stayed silent. No surface-to-air threats yet. That would change. The Taliban knew what an A-10 could do. They'd learned to respect the sound of those turbofans, the shriek of the GAU-8 cannon that could tear apart anything ground level. They'd also learned to hide better, to wait until the Warthog committed to an attack before revealing their positions. Longbow 3-1, Reaper 2-6. A new voice, clipped and urgent, Predator drone controller. We have eyes on Outpost Keating. Stand by for grid. Send it. The coordinates scrolled across her display. She was 4 minutes out, flying at 400 knots just above the valley floor. The dust storm Hendricks mentioned was visible now, a wall of brown consuming the northern horizon. It would ground everything within the hour. This wasn't just a rescue mission. It was the only rescue mission. Reaper 2-6, what's the tactical situation? Silence, long enough that Alina's chest tightened. Then, Longbow, they've breached the perimeter, fighting's inside the wire. We're counting at least 40 enemy KIA already, but they keep coming. Our guys are down to final defensive positions. The way he said final made it clear. The outpost was dying. Alina checked her ordnance panel. 1,100 rounds of 30mm ammunition, 6 AGM-65 Maverick missiles, 4 Hydra rocket pods with 38 rockets total, 2 AIM-9 Sidewinders for self-defense that she'd probably never use. It sounded like an arsenal. Against 300 fighters dug into mountainous terrain, it was barely adequate. Reaper, how long until the fast movers arrive? F-16s are 22 minutes out. Apache tried to launch but turned back, visibility's dropping below minimums. 22 minutes, the outpost wouldn't last 5. She pushed the throttles to maximum, the turbofans screaming protest. The A-10 wasn't designed for speed, but she'd learned every trick to coax a few extra knots. Dive slightly, accept the risk. Trade altitude for velocity. Trust that years of experience counted for something when physics said otherwise. 3 minutes now. Through the canopy she could see smoke, black columns rising from the valley ahead. Outpost Keating was burning. All stations, Longbow 3-1 is 2 minutes out. Reaper, paint me targets. Longbow, be advised. They've got DSHK heavy machine guns positioned on the ridgelines. Our guys are pinned in 3 buildings. The enemy is literally on top of them. Danger close. The kind of engagement where one wrong calculation meant killing the people she was trying to save. Alina's hands were steady on the stick. They always were when it mattered. The shaking came later in the shower when nobody watched. 1 minute. The valley opened before her, and she saw hell rendered in dust and gunfire. The outpost was a collection of mud brick buildings and HESCO barriers carved into a mountainside, designed by someone who'd never considered they might need to defend it from high ground on 3 sides. Taliban fighters swarmed the compound like ants, muzzle flashes sparking from every direction. Tracers arced through the smoke. An American flag still flew from the center post, tattered and defiant. Longbow 3-1 Keating Actual. A new voice ragged with exhaustion, the outpost commander. Where's our air support? Looking at you right now, Keating. Longbow 3-1 inbound. I need eyes on friendly positions immediately. We're explosions drowned his words. 3 buildings northeast corner. They're in the wire, they're everywhere. We can't hold. You're going to hold. Elena banked hard, her eyes scanning the chaos below. Decades of combat experience compressed into seconds of assessment. Pop smoke on your positions, purple if you have it. She armed the GAU-8 cannon, the targeting pipper glowing on her heads-up display. The A-10 was designed for this. Close air support, danger close, when fast movers were too fast and helicopters too vulnerable. She trained for urban combat, for troops in contact, for the scenarios where precision mattered more than payload. Training was academic. This was 43 heartbeats away from massacre. Purple smoke billowed from 3 locations clustered in the northeast. Elena adjusted her approach, coming in from the south at 200 feet. The Taliban on the ridgeline saw her. They always did. The A-10 wasn't stealthy, and heavy machine gun fire stitched toward her aircraft. The titanium bathtub surrounding her cockpit absorbed rounds that would have shredded lesser planes. She ignored it, focused on the enemy position 70 meters from friendly smoke. That was close. Too close for most pilots. For Elena Voss, it was Tuesday. Her finger touched the trigger. The GAU-8 Avenger cannon roared to life, 65 rounds per second, each 30mm projectile carrying enough kinetic energy to destroy vehicles. The sound was distinctive, a deep mechanical bellow that earned the A-10 its nickname. Warthog. Ugly, brutish, unstoppable. The ridge exploded. Rock and earth and enemy fighters vaporized in a precise line exactly where she'd aimed. The cannon's recoil actually slowed her aircraft, fighting against physics. Elena walked the fire across enemy positions, 3-second bursts that turned fortified positions into graves. Impact, impact, Keating Actual shouted. Keep firing, keep firing. But she'd already rolled away, circling to assess. Smoke obscured everything. Through it, she saw movement, more fighters rushing toward the breached perimeter, trying to overwhelm through sheer numbers before she could reposition. Reaper marked target's north wall, 100 meters. Marking now. Longbow, you're still taking fire from the eastern ridge. Copy? She barely registered the tracers. The eastern ridge would have to wait. The fighters at the north wall were seconds from reaching American positions. Elena selected a hydropod, designated the target area, and fired. 19 rockets streaked downward, their white smoke trails beautiful and terrible. They impacted in a rolling thunder that shook the valley. When the smoke cleared, the north wall was clear. The enemy advance had simply ceased to exist. Keating Actual Longbow, report status. Heavy breathing, gunfire in the background. We're still here, I don't. We're still here. How much ammunition do you have? Elena checked her displays. 800 rounds remaining, 5 Mavericks, 3 rocket pods. Enough. How long until you can evacuate? The LZ is overrun. We'd need at least 30 minutes to secure it for a Chinook. 30 minutes. She had maybe 15 before bingo fuel forced her to leave. The F-16s might arrive by then, but they couldn't provide the sustained close support her aircraft could. They'd make runs, drop ordnance, gone before the smoke cleared. The A-10 could stay, could orbit, could put steel exactly where it was needed for as long as ammunition lasted. Then I'm staying for 30 minutes, Elena said simply. Keep your heads down and mark targets, let's clean house. For the next 27 minutes, Major Elena Voss became death from above. She worked methodically, eliminating threats with the kind of precision that only came from 2 decades of experience. Every cannon burst found its mark. Every Maverick missile erased a fortified position. The Hydra rockets turned enemy formations into scattered survivors who fled into the mountains. She took hits, 17 in total, The maintenance report would count them later. Small arms fire that pockmarked her wings. A DSHK round that punched through her left horizontal stabilizer. None of it mattered because the A-10 was built to take punishment, and Alina Voss was built the same way. The younger pilots arrived at the 20-minute mark. She heard them on the radio, their voices tight with adrenaline as they dove into the fight. But the battle was already over. The Taliban had broken, withdrawn into the mountains where even American air power struggled to reach. The outpost still stood, all 43 personnel wounded but alive. Longbow 3-1 Keating Actual. The commander's voice was different now, steady, grateful. LZ is secure, we're evacuating now. I don't know how to, I don't know what you just did, but... Stay safe, Keating, get your people home. Alina was already turning south, her fuel gauge screaming warnings. Longbow 3-1 RTB. The flight back was a blur. Her hands started shaking somewhere over the mountains. By the time Bagram appeared on the horizon, she could barely hold the stick steady. The adrenaline debt was coming due. Her body, remembering it, was 41 and had just flown combat missions young pilots trained years to attempt. She landed heavy, the damaged stabilizer making her approach sloppy. Gutierrez and his crew were waiting, their faces showing something she hadn't seen in years. Not pity, not tolerance, respect. Colonel Hendricks was there too, standing beside a full honor guard that snapped to attention as she climbed down the ladder. Her legs almost gave out. Gutierrez caught her elbow, steadying her without making it obvious. Major Voss, Hendricks' voice carried across the flight line. 43 personnel extracted, 0 friendly KIA, estimated 200 enemy casualties. He paused. That's the finest display of close air support I've witnessed in 32 years of service. Alina didn't know what to say, didn't trust her voice. She just nodded. Captain Mitchell approached, the cocky pilot from the briefing. He looked different now, younger somehow. Ma'am, I owe you an apology. I didn't. I shouldn't have. You should have trusted the aircraft, Alina interrupted quietly. The A-10 isn't sexy. It's not fast. But when people are dying and someone needs to stay until the job's done, there's nothing else that can do what she does. She patted the Warthog's scarred fuselage. Same goes for old pilots they're trying to retire. Mitchell nodded slowly. Your call sign, Longbow, why that? Because bows are ancient weapons everyone thinks are obsolete. She smiled, exhausted. Right up until they realize how much damage one can still do in the right hands. That night the story spread through Bagram like wildfire. The major they'd overlooked. The obsolete aircraft nobody wanted. 7 minutes to wheels up. 27 minutes of sustained combat. 43 lives saved because someone old enough to know better decided experience mattered more than the manual. Alina Voss sat in her quarters, hands finally steady, and wrote 43 names in her journal. She didn't know any of them personally. Probably never would. But she'd carry their weight anyway, the way she carried every mission, every decision, every moment where she'd chosen to keep flying when younger pilots suggested she shouldn't. In the morning, there would be debriefs and medal paperwork she'd try to decline. There would be interviews she'd deflect and attention she'd avoid. The Air Force would probably extend her service, offer her a desk job at the Pentagon, something respectable for a pilot who'd become legendary overnight. She'd decline it all, stay at Bagram, keep flying the Warthog they kept threatening to retire, because 43 people were alive specifically because she'd refused to accept that old meant useless, that experience meant obsolete, that a female pilot in her 40s couldn't still be the most lethal asset on the base. The sky didn't care about age. The A-10 didn't care about gender. And the enemy definitely didn't care about anything except whether you could bring the thunder when it mattered. Alina Voss would again. That was all that ever needed to matter. The medals came anyway. She wore them once for the ceremony, then locked them in a drawer and never looked at them again. What mattered was the next mission, the next crisis. The next time someone needed a pilot who'd forgotten how to quit. The story didn't end. It evolved, spread through military circles like gospel, the old guard pilot, the warthog they couldn't kill, 7 minutes, that became the shorthand. Everyone knew what it meant. And somewhere in the Hindu Kush Mountains, 43 people went home to families who would never know how close they'd come to not coming home at all. Never know that their survival hinged on one woman who woke at 4 in the morning to pre-flight an aircraft everyone said was outdated, just in case someone needed her to prove them wrong. Elena Voss preferred it that way, anonymous heroism, quiet competence. Let the young pilots have their glory, she had work to do. The sun rose the next morning, and she was already on the flight line. The weeks following Outpost Keating changed nothing and everything. Elena Voss still arrived at 0400 to pre-flight her aircraft, still flew with the same quiet intensity that had defined 2 decades of service, still avoided the spotlight that now followed her wherever she walked on base. But the younger pilots were different. They watched her now, not with the dismissive tolerance of before, but with something approaching reverence. Mitchell, the captain who'd laughed in the briefing room, requested to fly on her wing. Others followed. Suddenly, Longbow 31 wasn't flying alone anymore. She found it exhausting. "You realize this is temporary," she told Gutierrez one morning while he patched bullet holes in her starboard wing. "Next month there'll be some new crisis, some new hero. They'll forget about the old woman and her ugly airplane." Gutierrez didn't look up from his work. "With respect, Major, you don't understand what you did. Keating wasn't just a mission. It was proof. Every pilot on this base who's been told they're too old, too slow, too whatever, you showed them experience still matters. That's not temporary." Elena didn't respond. She'd spent her career avoiding this kind of attention. The female pilot narrative, the underdog story. She wanted to be judged by competence alone, but the world insisted on adding context, on making her gender and age part of the equation. At least now, the equation balanced in her favor. The second crisis came 3 weeks later. A convoy ambushed in Helmand Province, 12 vehicles stranded in a kill zone with wounded personnel. The F-16s were already engaged elsewhere. The Apache were conducting operations 200 miles south. Longbow 31 was the only available asset. Elena launched in 4 minutes this time. She'd gotten faster. The convoy commander's voice was steady despite the chaos behind him. "Longbow 31, Viper 6. We have 9 wounded, 3 critical. Enemy positions are ridgeline west and compounds north. Medevac can't land until we're clear." "Copy, Viper 6. Where do you need me?" "Everywhere, they're everywhere." She'd heard that before, 3 weeks ago from a different commander in a different valley. The tactics were the same: surround, overwhelm, wait for darkness or dust or weather to deny American air superiority. The Taliban had learned this from experience. So had Elena Voss. The difference was she'd learned better. The attack run was textbook. Cannon fire on the ridgeline, Mavericks on the compounds, Hydra rockets for the scattered infantry trying to flank the convoy. She worked systematically, prioritizing threats, conserving ammunition for follow-up runs. The A-10's loiter time was its greatest advantage. She could stay overhead, adjusting, responding, maintaining pressure until the situation stabilized. 15 minutes in, Viper 6 called again. "Longbow, we're clear to extract. Medevac is inbound. I don't know how you." "Just doing my job, Viper. Get those wounded home." But she knew it wasn't just her job anymore. It was becoming her identity, the pilot who showed up, the warthog that wouldn't quit. Longbow 31, the call sign that meant help was inbound. That night, Colonel Hendricks requested her presence in his office. He looked tired, older than his 56 years. "Major, we need to talk about your status." Here it comes, Elena thought. The desk job. The promotion to a position where she'd never fly again. The honorable way to ground a pilot who'd become more valuable as a symbol than an operator. I'm recommending you for Lieutenant Colonel, Hendricks continued, and I'm denying the recommendation. Elena blinked, sir. Because accepting it means you take a squadron command, means you fly a desk and coordinate other pilots. And what I've learned in the past month is that you're too valuable doing exactly what you're doing. He leaned forward. How many more years can you give me, Elena? She'd never heard him use her first name before. How many do you need? All of them. Until the Warthog actually gets retired, until they physically drag you from the cockpit, I need you flying missions. Is that something you want? Want was a strange word. She wanted sleep, wanted knees that didn't ache after long flights, wanted a life that didn't revolve around 7-minute scrambles to save strangers. But underneath all that was something stronger, the need to be useful, to matter, to prove that dedication and experience could still triumph over youth and speed. I'll fly as long as you'll let me, sir. Hendricks nodded slowly. Then we have an understanding. You keep doing what you do. I'll keep the bureaucracy off your back. And the spotlight, the interviews. I'll handle those too. You just fly. Elena stood to leave, then paused. Sir, why now? Why does everyone suddenly care about an old pilot and an obsolete aircraft? Because everyone's been told their experience doesn't matter anymore. That faster is better, newer is superior, youth trumps wisdom. You proved that wrong. He smiled slightly. Turns out people needed that proof. Badly. The missions continued. Some were routine patrols. Others were desperate scrambles like Keating and Helmand. Elena flew them all with the same methodical intensity, never knowing which morning would bring just another sortie or a crisis that demanded everything she had. The younger pilots kept volunteering for her wing. She mentored them without meaning to, teaching through demonstration rather than lecture. How to read terrain for hidden threats. How to prioritize targets when everything seemed urgent. How to stay calm when the radio filled with panic and the sky filled with tracers. Mitchell became a regular presence. He flew well, Elena admitted. Just needed to trust his instincts instead of his training. One mission when they caught a Taliban mortar team setting up near a firebase, Mitchell hesitated. The shot was challenging, the margin for error minimal. Longbow 3-1, Longbow 3-2. His voice was uncertain. I don't have the angle. Then make one. You've got 20 seconds before they fire. She heard him breathe, heard the decision solidify. His A-10 banked hard, steeper than doctrine recommended, and his cannon burst was perfect. The mortar team dissolved. The firebase stayed safe. Nice shot, 3-2. Learned from the best, ma'am. Elena smiled despite herself. Maybe mentoring wasn't so bad. The third crisis came on a morning when the sky was clear and the base was quiet. Too quiet. Elena was finishing her pre-flight when the alarm sounded. Not the regular scramble alarm. The emergency action message tone that meant something catastrophic had occurred. She was running before the announcement finished. Every pilot on base was running. The operations center was chaos. Screens showed a disaster unfolding in real time. A C-17 transport had taken heavy fire during a Kabul evacuation. The aircraft was damaged, losing altitude over hostile territory with 300 evacuees aboard. It couldn't make Bagram, couldn't make any secured airfield. The pilots were attempting an emergency landing on an abandoned Soviet-era runway near Ghazni, a stretch of cracked concrete surrounded by Taliban-controlled villages. If they landed there, they'd be overrun before rescue could arrive. Time until landing, Hendricks demanded. 12 minutes. Where are the QRF helicopters? Grounded for maintenance. Next available assets are 40 minutes out. Fast movers. En route, 15 minutes. But they can't provide security on the ground. That C-17 lands, we're looking at a hostage situation with 300 civilians. The room fell silent, everyone understanding the calculus. 300 people, mostly Afghan civilians fleeing Taliban rule, about to become pawns in a nightmare scenario that would dominate news cycles for months. Alina stepped forward. How far is Ghazni from here? 70 nautical miles. Hendricks saw where she was going. Longbow, even at maximum speed. 9 minutes. I can be overhead in 9 minutes. She was already moving. Call sign Longbow 3-1, requesting immediate combat takeoff. Major, you'll be alone out there. No support, no backup. Then I'll make do. She stopped at the door. Sir, we both know what happens if that plane lands without air cover. 300 hostages. International crisis. I'm not letting that happen because we waited for the perfect solution. Hendricks held her gaze for 3 seconds, then nodded once. Get airborne. I'll scramble everything else as backup. Alina ran. Gutierrez and his crew saw her coming, read her expression, and started emergency startup procedures before she reached the aircraft. No time for careful checks. No time for proper protocols. Just trust that 19 years of routine maintenance meant the Warthog would perform when it mattered most. She was wheels up in 2 minutes and 30 seconds, a personal record she'd never wanted to set. The radio filled with voices. The C-17 crew, their professionalism cracking as they fought dying engines. Air traffic controllers trying to coordinate a rescue that didn't exist yet. Intelligence officers feeding real-time updates on Taliban movements converging on the abandoned runway. Alina tuned it all out, focused on speed. The A-10 wasn't built for this, for racing against time with hundreds of lives as the prize. But she knew every aerodynamic trick, every way to coax extra speed from reluctant engines. She flew at treetop level, trading safety margins for velocity. 8 minutes. The C-17 appeared on her radar. Big, lumbering, trailing smoke from damaged engines, beautiful and doomed. The crew was in the landing pattern now, committed to the approach. No choice. Land or crash, those were the only options. Angel 17, Longbow 3-1. I'm 4 minutes out. Give me the tactical situation. The C-17 pilot's voice was strained. Longbow, we're landing whether you're there or not. Hydraulics failing. Number 3 engine gone, fuel dumping from the port wing. We've got maybe one approach before this bird quits flying. Understood. Once you're down, how long until you can get everyone off? Best case, 10 minutes. We've got elderly, children, wounded. If we're contested, could be 20. 20 minutes. Alone. Against however many Taliban fighters reached the runway before reinforcements arrived. Alina checked her ordnance. Full combat load she'd been scheduled for patrol. 1,100 cannon rounds, 6 Mavericks, 4 Hydra pods. The equipment was adequate, the odds were not. She'd faced worse. That was a lie, but she told herself anyway. 3 minutes now. The abandoned runway appeared ahead, a gray scar cutting through farmland that had long since returned to subsistence agriculture. Soviet-era bunkers dotted the perimeter, perfect cover for attackers. The surrounding villages showed vehicle movement, trucks heading toward the runway. The Taliban knew what was happening. Angel 17, Longbow has visual on your landing site. Be advised, hostiles approaching from multiple vectors. Copy Longbow, we're committed. 30 seconds to touchdown. Alina circled high, assessing. The C-17 was massive against the landscape, descending on emergency procedures, smoke streaming behind. Vulnerable. If she'd been Taliban, she'd wait until the transport was on the ground, engines spooling down, unable to escape. Then attack from all sides simultaneously. Which meant she had maybe 60 seconds after landing before the fight began. The C-17 touched down hard, sparks flying from damaged landing gear. It rolled half the runway's length before stopping. Nose gear nearly collapsed, wounded but intact. The rear ramp began lowering immediately. Alina counted to 15, enough time for the crew to start evacuation procedures. Then she dove. The truck convoy from the nearest village never saw her coming. Her cannon fire walked across the lead vehicles, precise and devastating. The convoy scattered, fighters abandoning trucks to take cover in irrigation ditches. Not destroyed, but delayed. That was enough. Angel 17 Longbow, you've got 5 minutes before they regroup. Move fast. Copy. The C-17 pilot's voice was steadier now. Having air support, even a single A-10, changed everything. Evacuees are disembarking. It's chaos, but we're managing. Alina circled, watching. More vehicles appeared from different directions. This wasn't opportunistic. This was coordinated. The Taliban had been waiting for exactly this scenario, and now they smelled blood. A technical pickup truck with a DSHK heavy machine gun mounted in the bed broke from cover, racing toward the runway. Alina fired a Maverick. The missile streaked downward, and the technical simply vanished in a fireball. But 3 more appeared behind it, spreading out, making themselves harder targets. She took them with cannon fire, methodical bursts that turned aggressiveness into wreckage. But ammunition was finite. She could feel the calculus shifting with every trigger pull. Longbow were taking fire from the old bunker complex north side. The C-17's loadmaster, his voice tight. Rifle rounds mostly, but it's slowing evacuation. Alina banked hard. The bunker complex was partially collapsed but still offered cover. She could see muzzle flashes, fighters using the Soviet structures exactly as intended. The Mavericks were overkill for infantry. The cannon would work, but danger close to the C-17. She selected a hydropod instead, designated the bunker complex, and fired. 19 rockets impacted in a rippling storm. When the smoke cleared, the bunkers were silent. Loadmaster Longbow, you're clear. Copy. Jesus, ma'am, that was. Focus on your evacuees. How much longer? 8 minutes, maybe 7 if everyone cooperates. 7 minutes. Alina checked her fuel. She could stay on station for 45 minutes at current burn rate, but that assumed no more high-speed maneuvering. Ammunition was the bigger concern. She'd expended 1 Maverick, 1 rocket pod, 300 cannon rounds, enough remaining for maybe 3 more serious engagements. And the Taliban kept coming. They'd learned from past battles. Instead of massing for her to destroy, they approached in small groups from multiple directions, forcing her to respond to every threat, depleting her ammunition on targets that individually weren't worth the ordnance but collectively added up to a siege. She worked systematically. Cannon bursts for the technicals, Mavericks for the larger truck groups that looked like they might carry coordinated infantry. The Hydra rockets she saved for concentrations near the runway perimeter. Every decision calculated to maximize delay while conserving resources. Longbow Angel 17, we've got everyone loaded, starting engines now. Copy. Alina's voice stayed calm despite the situation. Be advised, you've got hostiles at your 2 o'clock, 500 meters. They're trying to position for an RPG shot on your takeoff roll. Can you suppress? Working on it. She dove again, lower than before, her altimeter screaming warnings. The fighters at 2 o'clock saw her coming, scattered. But one stayed, shouldering an RPG-7, aiming not at her but at where the C-17 would pass during takeoff. Dedicated. Dangerous. Alina's cannon burst was surgical. 20 rounds exactly placed. The fighter fell, the RPG unfired. But her dive had taken her into small arms range. She felt the impacts, heard the metal-on-metal ping of rounds hitting her aircraft. The A-10 absorbed it, kept flying, but every hit was damage that would need repair, assuming she made it back. Angel 17 is rolling. The C-17's engines roared, the massive transport accelerating down the runway. Slow, so slow. The design wasn't meant for short-field takeoffs with maximum load. Alina watched the airspeed indicator in her mind. The transport would need every meter of runway to get airborne. Fighters appeared from a farmhouse complex, sprinting toward the runway with RPGs. They wouldn't reach it in time, but they'd get close enough for shots. Alina didn't have cannon rounds to spare on individual targets. Used another Maverick instead, obliterating the farmhouse and the threat simultaneously. The C-17 rotated at the runway's end, clawing for altitude. For 3 seconds, Alina held her breath, watching the transport fight gravity. Then it was airborne, gear retracting, climbing slowly but definitely away from the kill zone. Longbow Angel 17, we're clear, thanks for. I don't have words, just thank you. Get them home safe. Longbow 31 is staying on station until reinforcements arrive. Which would be another 10 minutes. She was alone over hostile territory with maybe 500 cannon rounds, 3 Mavericks, 2 rocket pods, and a damaged aircraft. The smart play was to withdraw, leave the area to the fast movers inbound behind her. But Alina Voss had never been good at making the smart play when the right play was available. The Taliban below had just tried to kill 300 civilians. Letting them withdraw unpunished felt wrong. She went hunting. For the next 9 minutes, Longbow 31 became a persistent nightmare over Ghazni province. Every vehicle that moved, every group that gathered, every defensive position that revealed itself, she engaged methodically, spending her remaining ordnance with the kind of precision that only came from 2 decades of experience. The Taliban had expected American air power to strike hard and withdraw. They weren't prepared for a single aircraft that simply refused to leave. That kept circling, kept shooting, kept making them pay for every aggressive move. By the time the F-16s arrived, the battlefield was silent. Not because the enemy was destroyed, but because they'd learned that movement meant death from above. They'd gone to ground, waiting for the American aircraft to exhaust themselves and depart. They didn't understand that Alina Voss had already exhausted everything except will. Longbow 31, Viper 11, we've got the area covered. You're cleared to RTB. Copy Viper, area is yours. Alina turned south, her Warthog battered and nearly empty, limping toward home at reduced speed. Good hunting. The flight back was longer than the flight there. Time expanded when the adrenaline faded, when the body started acknowledging damage. Her left shoulder hurt from compensating for the damaged flight controls. Her hands were cramping from maintaining pressure on a sluggish stick. The aircraft was making sounds that weren't in any technical manual. But 300 people were alive because she'd reached that runway in 9 minutes, because the A-10 could loiter, because experience had taught her how to make every round count. The sun was setting when Bagram appeared on the horizon, beautiful and indifferent like always. Alina lined up for landing, her approach gentler than usual to account for the damage. The tower had cleared all other traffic. She had the runway to herself, like she'd had the sky over Ghazni. The landing was rougher than she'd intended. The damaged stabilizer made her float, then drop hard. But the wheels held, and the aircraft rolled to a stop without falling apart. Alina shut down the engines, her hands shaking too badly to properly complete the checklist. Gutierrez was there with the full maintenance crew, their faces showing relief and concern in equal measure. He climbed the ladder, opened the canopy, took one look at her and said, "Major, you look like hell." "Feel worse." She tried to stand, couldn't quite manage it. "How bad is the damage?" "You brought her home. That's all that matters right now." But they both knew she'd pushed the aircraft beyond safe limits, that the repairs would take days, that regulations said she should be grounded for medical evaluation after flying wounded. Alina Voss would be back in the cockpit tomorrow. Everyone knew it. Colonel Hendricks was waiting on the tarmac with the C-17 crew, who'd landed 30 minutes earlier. The transport's pilots looked like they'd aged years in one day. When Alina finally made it down the ladder on legs that didn't quite work right, the aircraft commander stepped forward and saluted with the kind of precision that spoke of genuine respect. Major Voss, on behalf of 300 people who didn't die today, thank you doesn't cover it. Elena returned the salute tiredly. Just doing my job, Captain. Ma'am, with respect, your job description doesn't include single-handedly holding off an entire Taliban assault force with a damaged aircraft and half a combat load. What you did was, he shook his head. It was legendary. That word again. Legendary. Elena hated it. Legends were distant, untouchable. She was just a pilot who'd been in the right place at the right time with the right amount of stubborn refusal to quit. But looking at the C-17 crew, at the ground personnel who'd gathered to watch, at the younger pilots like Mitchell who stood at attention despite no formal ceremony, she realized something had shifted. This wasn't about Outpost Keating anymore. Wasn't about one dramatic rescue. It was about a pattern, a reputation, proof that experience and dedication could match any tactical situation. She was becoming exactly what she'd tried to avoid, a symbol. Get some rest, Major, Hendricks said quietly. Medical debrief tomorrow at 0900. Sir, I'm scheduled for patrol at 06. Not anymore, that's an order. Elena wanted to argue, but her body had reached its limit. She nodded, surrendering to exhaustion and necessity in equal measure. That night, 300 evacuees continued their journey to safety. Outpost Keating's 43 soldiers recovered in various hospitals. The convoy from Helmand Province returned to base without further incident. None of them knew each other. None of them would ever meet. But they shared one connection. They'd all survived because one woman in a warthog had shown up and refused to leave until the job was done. In her quarters, Elena finally allowed herself to feel the weight of it, the responsibility, the pressure, the expectations now attached to her call sign. Longbow 3-1 wasn't just her anymore, it was becoming an idea. A promise that when things went wrong, when situations became impossible, someone would respond who'd forgotten how to accept defeat. That was a heavy burden for a 41-year-old pilot whose knees hurt and whose hands shook after every mission. But it was also purpose, meaning, the thing she'd been searching for through 20 years of service. Maybe being a symbol wasn't so terrible after all. The missions continued. Not every day brought crisis. Most were routine patrols, presence operations, showing the flag over disputed territory. Elena flew them all with the same attention, the same pre-flight rigor, the same refusal to treat any sortie as unimportant, because she never knew which routine patrol would become the next Keating, the next Ghazni. But the routine missions became fewer as word spread through the military infrastructure. When planners needed close air support for difficult operations, they started specifically requesting Longbow 3-1. When ground commanders prepared for contested areas, they asked if the old Warthog pilot could be on call. Elena found herself becoming a specialized asset, deployed deliberately rather than randomly. Part of her resented it, the pressure, the assumption that she'd always pull off miracles, the way other pilots looked at her like she was somehow different, better, when she knew she was just older and more stubborn. But another part understood why it happened. In a military increasingly focused on technology and youth, she represented something people needed to believe in. That skill still mattered, that experience counted, that old didn't mean obsolete. Mitchell had become her unofficial wingman, flying with her whenever possible. He'd grown during their months together, learned to trust his instincts, developed the kind of calm under fire that couldn't be taught in training. One mission over Kandahar, when they engaged a Taliban convoy attempting to flee toward the Pakistani border, Mitchell's performance was flawless. After they landed, Elena approached him on the flight line. "You're ready." "Ready for what, ma'am?" "To fly alone. To be someone's Longbow 3-1 when I'm not available." Mitchell looked stunned. "Ma'am, I'm nowhere near your level." "Nobody is," Elena said bluntly. "But that's not the point. The point is you've learned what matters, calm under pressure, precision over speed, commitment to the mission over personal safety. Those are the skills that save lives. The rest is just hours in the cockpit. Thank you, ma'am, he hesitated. Can I ask you something? Why do you do this? You could have retired with honors years ago, could take a safe position. Why keep flying missions that might kill you? Elena looked at her warthog, scarred and patched from countless engagements. Because the alternative is letting someone less experienced fly them, someone who might not bring everyone home. I can't accept that, not while I'm still capable. What happens when you're not capable anymore? She smiled slightly. Then I'll retire, but I'm not there yet. The pattern held for another 8 months. Elena flew. People lived. The legend grew. She'd stopped trying to avoid attention and instead managed it, using her platform to advocate for the A-10 program and for experienced pilots being pushed toward retirement. If she was going to be a symbol, she'd be a useful one. The final mission came on a morning that felt like any other. Clear sky, mild weather, routine patrols scheduled over Helmand Province. Elena did her pre-flight at 0400, same as always. Everything checked out. The Warthog was in better shape than it had been in months, Gutierrez and his crew having rebuilt nearly every system after the accumulated damage from previous missions. Fly safe, Major, Gutierrez said as she climbed the ladder. Always do, Ramon. Yeah, that's what worries me. Your definition of safe is terrifying. She laughed. He was right, of course, but some definitions had to be flexible. The patrol was uneventful for the first 90 minutes. She flew her route, checked in with ground units, maintained presence over areas where Taliban activity was possible. Mitchell flew her wing, maintaining perfect formation. Just another day in Afghanistan. Then the emergency frequency erupted with chatter. A special operations team had been ambushed during a high-value target raid. They were pinned in a compound surrounded by enemy reinforcements. Air support had been delayed due to weather over Kabul. The nearest available assets were Longbow 3-1 and her wingman. 20 minutes away. The SF team had maybe 10 before being overrun. Elena didn't hesitate. Longbow flight emergency combat speed, 3-2, stay with me. Copy 3-1. They pushed the Warthogs to maximum sustainable velocity, the engines howling protest. Not fast enough, never fast enough, but all they had. Longbow 3-1, Hatchet 2-6. The SF team leader, his voice professional despite obvious stress. We're in a 2-story compound, 12 operators, 18 enemy KIA so far, but they keep coming. We need danger close support immediately. Roger, Hatchet, ETA 18 minutes, can you hold? A long pause, gunfire in the background. We'll try. 17 minutes. The compound appeared, surrounded by hostile forces that had learned from previous American raids. They weren't massing stupidly. They'd spread out, making themselves harder targets while maintaining pressure on the Americans trapped inside. Elena assessed the situation in seconds. The SF team was on the compound's second floor. Enemy fighters were in buildings all around, some close enough that normal close air support would risk fratricide. This required precision she'd practiced 1,000 times but hoped never to need. 3-2, I'm going low for gun runs. You maintain high cover, hit any reinforcements trying to join the fight. 3-1, that's too dangerous. Let me take the danger close shots. Negative, I've been doing this longer. High cover 3-2, that's an order. Mitchell didn't argue further. He pulled up, circling at 3,000 feet while Elena dove to 200. The compound rushed toward her. She fired, walked the cannon across enemy positions with the kind of precision that came from years of practice. 30 meters from friendly positions. 20. 15. The margin for error was measured in feet, and she'd never felt more calm. Her rounds impacted exactly where intended. Enemy fighters fell. The pressure on the compound eased. Hatchet, Longbow 3-1, you're clear east side. Can you extract? Negative, we've got wounded. Need another 3 minutes. 3 minutes. She had maybe 800 cannon rounds remaining, enough for 2 more passes. The enemy was already repositioning, understanding now that the A-10 overhead was the thing killing them. A technical appeared from a side street, its DSHK machine gun tracking her. Elena fired first, destroying the vehicle, but the shot had forced her to break her pattern, climb slightly to avoid debris. That's when the second DSHK opened fire, one she hadn't seen. The rounds walked across her aircraft, heavier than rifle fire. She felt the impacts, heard the alarms as systems failed. Number 2 engine was losing power, hydraulics pressure dropping. The stick got heavy. 3-1, you're hit, you're trailing smoke. I'm fine. She wasn't. The aircraft was dying. She could feel it in the controls, in the way the Warthog fought her inputs. 3-2, I need you to take the eastern positions. I'll cover the north. 3-1, you need to egress. Your aircraft will fly long enough. Eastern positions. 3-2, now. Mitchell's A-10 Dove, his cannon fire precise despite the urgency. He was good. She taught him well. The eastern positions dissolved under his attack. Elena turned her crippled aircraft toward the north, where more fighters were gathering. Number 2 engine quit entirely. She was flying on one turbofan now, the aircraft sluggish and barely responsive. The smart move was to climb, try to make it back to Bagram on one engine. But the SF team was still on the ground, still vulnerable, still needing 3 minutes. She made the choice she'd always made, the mission over safety, others over self. Her final cannon burst was perfect. The northern positions fell silent. The compound was clear. Hatchet Longbow 3-1, you're clear all sides, extract now. Copy Longbow, we're moving. A pause, are you okay up there? Never better, the lie came easily. She was on fire now, she could see the flames reflecting off her canopy. Get to your exfil point, Longbow